Okay, good morning to all of you and good evening in Australia. You'll notice that we have a difference today. As I mentioned to you last week, we had completed going through the first two quarters. And today and next week we're going to have, what I think is a fascinating exercise in seeing genetic continuity. Genetic continuity has been one of my favorite expressions in relationship to trying to explain the nature of the holistic being. And genetic continuity operates in many, many ways within the body graph. The genetic continuity that is there between, let's say, the 41 and the 30, that is the obvious one that we understand, an electromagnetic connection, an attraction between this chemistry and that chemistry. There is a genetic continuity between, gates that are pressure gates. There is a continuity between, for example, the 61, the 63, the 64. And there is a continuity, a genetic continuity related to the way in which they need to operate according to the demands of the design of the vehicle. There's all kinds of genetic continuity, relationships that exist that are beneath the surface or beneath the obvious. And in that way begin to understand both or have a deeper appreciation of gates and their relationship to other gates, which is enormously important in grasping the nature of the design of the body graph. The body graph is a fantastic thing. And I do love making illustrations, and I had great fun with this one because it's about as complex an illustration as you can get in human design. See, we're not looking at the individual faces today. We've done that. We've gone through, and this is the full quarter of initiation that we began with, that is Kali and Mitra and Michael and Janus, the faces that run from 5 until 8. This is the quarter of initiation. And you can see illustrated here in terms of the body graph and the wheel, the relationship of these four faces, with that arc in the wheel, that we know as the quarter of initiation. And here you can see the configuration. You can see where initiation gets its name in that sense, because there is the channel of initiation that is rooted in this 16. Interestingly enough, though, when you think that it's 1/4 of all the hexagrams that are in the body graph, that there is only one definition, which is something to think about. It's actually, it leads one to grasp how much of an effect these various gates have on their harmonic gates within the context of the body graph itself. You also get to see some odd things when you think about it. First of all, the nature of the chops themselves. Because today we're going to be looking at genetic continuity, and we're going to be looking at gate continuity. So let's first of all take a look at the structure itself. And you see I have a little diagram down here for you of the basic structure. And what we know is that, the quarter binary, that is lines 1 and 2, that wherever we look, lines 1 and 2 are commonality. This is the C in the amino acid readout. Okay? So we see that there is this continuity that is there through all 16 of the gates. And then we have the face binary. The face binary that establishes for us the Godheads in that sense. That is the thematic Godheads that I've applied to these influences. And when you look at that, you see that, if you look at all of Janus, that the face binary is yin-yin, and then if you look at all of Michael, you can see that it's changed, that it's yin-yang, and again here in Mitra, it's yang-yin, all the combinations, and then finally here in Kali, you have the yang-yang. So when you're looking at that middle binary, you're looking at the face binary. So in a sense, when we're looking at structure, and we're looking at the structure, from this perspective, that when we get to the top two, we're getting to the unique gate aspect and the unique gate aspect within that face. Now, one of the main themes of genetic continuity that I have taught, and it is the essence of being able to learn human design, because you cannot learn human design unless you understand lines. You cannot. Unless you understand the deep variations and keys of the numbers 1 to 6, you can never really get human design. You can't, at least not from the analytical point of view. And then the moment that you've mastered that understanding of line themes, you begin to see a fundamental continuity. There are 64 first lines. There is a fundamental continuity between all first lines because they all share a genetic principle. This is a level of genetic continuity. But here we're going to see something very specific. We're not going to be looking at line continuity. We're going to be looking at gate continuity. And gate continuity is something very special. It is unique relationships between gates in which we would not naturally see their relationship. And specifically the depth of their relationship when we see this continuity within each quarter. Because within each quarter there is a fundamental commonality, and yet at the same time this differentiation that comes through the different faces. Let me see if I can do that better for you. We have a quarter binary underneath. So we know that that is the 16 altogether. And what we're going to discover is that there is a genetic continuity that runs from the 13th gate to the 37th gate to the 25th gate, and then here to the 42nd gate. And that continuity, you can see what that continuity is. The continuity is a yang-yang top binary. All 4 of these gates have that yang-yang top binary. So what we have in each of these cases is a commonality of the base that is always the same, the base binary, which is the quarter. Okay, and then we have the commonality that is in the genetic continuity of these 4. We have the commonality of the yang-yang top. The only thing that is different here is that each belong to a different face. And obviously that brings out the substantial differences that define each gate as being different from each other. What I am suggesting here is not that there is a duplication of thematics, but there is an inherent relationship between each of these 4 gates, and particularly in the context that we're looking at, that is, the conditioning of the personality by the crystal bundles, that what we're seeing is that in each face there is an agent that operates in a specific way, and the way in which that agent operates is mirrored, is duplicated in every other face. So we begin with the continuity here that exists between the 13, the 37, the 25, and the 42. When I was going through my mystical process, I had an experimental school. And in hindsight, it was very important for me. It was all about being able to take very, very complex subjects and distill them down into a simplicity that a teenager could grasp. And when I began my work teaching human design, I was always looking for, these simple mechanisms, these simple keys. They're formulas, after all. And the only way that you can begin to understand the genetic continuity between these gates is to begin to play, because it's a kind of poetry. It's like the work I do in the normally about once a year I do a keynoting workshop of some kind. And Keynoting is an art. It's an art. It's an art that's rooted in a disciplined education, because you have to know the material you're working with. An artist without technique is going to have dilemmas. And yet at the same time there is a freedom to it. I look at these 4 gates and the 13th gate is a listener. And the 37th gate is the family. And the 25th gate is a gate of the shaman and the priestess. And the 42nd gate is the gate of growth. And when you begin to play with these, when you begin to play with the keynotes together, and remember what we're talking about. We're talking about the way in which the mind is going to be influenced. And we're talking about a relationship, a basic relationship, this yang-yang top, this basic relationship in combination with the yang-yin bottom. It's through this basic relationship that they're expressing something in common in terms of the way in which this quarter influences us. And remember, this is the quarter of mind. You can see it here. The yang beneath the yin. This is the beginning of the process, the yang pushing upward into the yin. That is mind entering into the form and bringing mutation as it enters into the form, or initiating the form. This is the driving movement. And here we have this yang-yang top. So let's think about it for a moment. The listener is more than a listener. The listener has power. And the power they have is that they carry secrets. They do. They carry secrets. It is their deepest power. And that these secrets are throughout, and they are a driving force. The 13th gate is there to assimilate the experiential way and prepare it for expression. It is the very basis of being a prodigal. This root of the fellowship of man. And it is through one's relationship with the other that the secret gains power. It's like the bargain in the 37. There is this, every time that anyone has ever made a contract, there is someone who is looking for the loopholes. There is somebody looking for something that's hidden. There are themes that run through each that bind them together. But most important of this is something to understand about the very beginnings of our influenced, being influenced by the forces here in these 4 faces, is to really grasp about how much they are, based on spirituality, the family, one's relationship with the other being the only way of growth. The only way of growth. The 42nd gate is a deeply, deeply involved gate. The growth in the abstract process is it's fundamental to the life and to life experience. It is the sacral expression of the abstract format. And everything about it is about these are the themes for instilling this growth. And that it is this growth that is being pushed through these 4 gates and controlled as well. It's like the 25th gate. This gift of the gods to humankind. This gift of things to contemplate, the gift of mind, and yet wrapped up in spirituality, wrapped up in a common secret, wrapped up in a cabal that says, this is the bargain. We, first of all, have to prepare for family. This is the way of growth. We have to dominate family through spirituality. This is the way of growth. You see, these four gates, though they are different from each other, and this is quite a mix. The deeply individual 25, the tribal 37, the abstract 42. Three different processes here, and each and every one of them has a bond. It's something to think about. You're somebody who carries the 25th gate, and you don't have the 13. It's something to realize that in meeting the 13, there's something really interesting about it. See, many times I've been asked over the years by businessmen and women who wanted the rights to create a dating agency, use human design to map how people can fit together. And of course it's pointless with the not self. It's pointless. It's easy with the not self. You just, you get the deepest conditioning you have, you give them an 8 and 1, and you send them off and they'll have fun for a while. That's not self. But the very basis of bonds that are not caught in the genetic imperative are these continuities that exist between gates. There is a very strong bond of recognition at the genetic level that takes place between the 13, the 37, the 25, and the 42. And matter of fact, they in fact complement each other. They do. This is genetic continuity. It isn't to say that, don't take this out of proportion and begin some kind of, analytical process where you're trying to equate your relationship to the other relative to the gate continuity. But boy, is it fun to look and see that, so much of our connection to the other, what is interesting about them, at the same time comforting, can be seen through genetic continuity. And by the way, there's many different kinds because we have 4 quarters. And there are all kinds of things that take place in all of this. So, maybe one day I do a course on it, but right now I just want you to begin to look differently at the relationships between gates in the body graph and understand they're instruments of the forces of the quarter. After all, the thing that binds these 4 faces together, is that quarter binary. This is what gives it its distinct nature, distinct from the other 4 quarters. And a quarter itself is supermanaged. In other words, that there is a higher force in that sense, coordinating the quarter, than the bundles themselves. The bundles, after all, are only filters. What we're looking at here within the context of this course is that we're looking at the way in which these faces filter, the neutrino information, and the way in which they, impact us at I was going to say a cellular level, but it is that. But literally within our context, the way they impact us through various gates and what that means. The other thing is that in looking at the quarter of initiation, we're looking at the quarter of mind. Mind. You see, I talk so much about the not self mind, how it's so, it's so locked in. It's such a deep homogenized well that it's in. And, when you look at all of these 16 gates and understand that each of them, through genetic continuity, is going to have a relationship to mind. They're all going to have a relationship to mind. They're all going to have a relationship to the way in which, to the way in which we think. Quarters are amazing things. They begin with, the Sphinx. Always begin with the gate of the Sphinx. Always close with the gate of the 4 ways. And this is the way of thinking. It is the way of thinking. It is the way of collecting experience, because that is what the 13 is. The 13 is one of the main memory gates that we have. And it is this collecting experience that leads to thinking. collecting the experience of the 49, of the 30, of the 55, and on and on and on and on, and collecting all of that experience, that leads to the foundation of mind. So we're looking at the whole progression of the development of mind. That is, what mind's going to be hooked into. You know, our minds, in order to be able to dominate us, have to be hooked into us some way. It is the 16 gates of the quarter of initiation that give the mind access to our processes. And doesn't that tell you something interesting? I mean, you know, everything about the bundles is that it influences the personality level of consciousness. But here, specifically in the quarter of initiation, every single gate is a portal for the mental system. And so it means that each and every one of these gates, in their relationships to other gates in the body graph, are translators and receptors of information for mind. Following the track, you know, following these tracks becomes something that's very significant. You know, how can you be this prodigal, this listener, this collector of experience, unless all of that, you know, I mean, how would we know about it unless mind has access to it? Mind is interested in the 13. It's connected to it. It's connected to the 37. It's connected to all of the gates that are here. They form the basis or the filters through which mind perceives its own existence. So the relationship that exists between these gates in any quarter, they're very special. And then to extrapolate that outward, the 13 goes to the 33, if you know what I mean. In other words, a network, a web that goes out from this level of continuity into the other levels of continuity. On and on. And that the deepest relationship that exists is going to be in those situations where somebody has, you know, the 37-6 and somebody else has the 13-6. You know, and then you're really going to see a similarity. You know, a deeper genetic continuity. The 49, the 63, the 17, and the 3. I was busy over the weekend beginning to assemble material for next semester. One of them is a course called Rave Anatomy, and there's a specific lecture on the incredible complexity of the third gate and its responsibility for inherited genetic differentiation. That is, it's the third gate in essence that it controls what will be passed on to the next generation. And in fact, not only what will be passed on to the next generation, but how, whether or what aspects of it that the next generation will actually take advantage of. The third gate is extraordinarily important for the establishment of the life principle. And, you know, it is also obviously deeply mutative. And it's something to see again about, you know, the understanding that we have here in that this is the yang pushing up into the yin, and the recognition that it all has to emerge through the yin. You know, the hidden truth of Janus, that this is truly a female principle, that is the Holy Mother and Child. You know, this is this is understanding that knowledge is something that is going to have to move through the body. You know, that this capacity for principles, that the potential of mind to doubt, you know, that this is all part of it. The need, the deep need, you know, of for concepts, for logic, that all of this has to emerge genetically out of the form, that all of this has to be endowed into the form. I mean, it would be interesting, for example, to do studies and see, for example, in in families that have a genetic history of high intelligence or genius, to be able to see whether the parents carried these continuity gates. My assumption is that they did. In other words, we're seeing a very powerful force here that is really an instrument of mind. And you don't normally think of the 49 and the 3 as being instruments of mind, but they are. They are. That is, mind is connected to the potential of the principles of the 49. And of course we know that the 49 is emotional. We know that it's a mutative codon, histidine. I mean, there's all kinds of things in that. And it says that if the 49 is mutative, if the 49 is part of a larger mutative process that is taking place now and is going to be realized in 2027, then it also means that the 63rd gate, the nature of doubt, without doubt. Notice here that it is the 63 and the 17, they're very deeply related to each other in body mechanics, and obviously very deeply related here in terms of the continuity mechanics. And of course they have an interesting similarity if you look at them. That is, they're quarter on the bottom and quarter on top. In other words, they are really, in that sense, very powerful expressions of, the theme of the quarter itself. In other words, you're going to have a more powerful expression of the quarter itself here in these gates than you do in the others. And of course, the goal of this, the ultimate goal of this, is to be able to instill in the vehicle and to be able to pass on, because again, the reason I introduced the complexity of the third gate is to understand that the third gate isn't simply about, ordering things and bringing them into form in the genetic sense of the word, or, it is one of its principles. But one of the things that is so incredible about the third gate is that it is responsible for what genes are brought forward. In other words, it's the third gate that determines recessives. It's the third gate that will determine whether you get something from your mother's side or you get something from your father's side. In other words, it controls the combining of what is the reproductive process. And that means that it carries genetic information forward generation by generation. It's its responsibility. Now, if you leave things behind and they're not carried forward, they're lost. I mean, we know that about any gene pool. You can kill off a gene pool, and then all the knowledge of that gene pool obviously is lost. And here we're looking at the theme of advancing the potential of mind through genetics. That's actually what it's saying. It's saying, basically what it's saying is that intelligence is something that grows generationally. It does not, the theme is not the growth of intelligence in the individual, in the life. It is the growth of the intelligence of the species over time. And all of this is geared towards, the fact that it is the form that's going to be responsible for carrying forward the potential of brain. And then it begins to say something rather interesting. It begins to show that in the genetic continuity, at least in terms of the quarter of initiation, which of course is the polarity to the quarter of duality, that there is going to be a selection imperative. In other words, it is here that you see that, brain is more important than brawn, that brain can be more important than beauty. In other words, intelligence is something that is worth moving forward to the next generation. And what is the very theme of this quarter's expression of intelligence? What is important? I mean, if we look at it this way, what is important? What's absolutely essential that we bring forward? The 49. the 63, and the 17. I mean, from the perspective of the quarter of initiation and its, its programming direction, if you will. In other words, that, without principles, there is no potential in that sense for the development of intelligence. It is principles that is so important to the development of human intelligence. Doubt is absolutely essential. Doubt embodies the ultimate challenge, in the Maya. That is to challenge any concept. And again, to see that this has to be carried forward. In other words, it has to be a trait that is physical. And of course, it's going to be brain related, a physical trait, that can be moved forward from one generation to the next. And you can see how, what the advantages are, because again, this is all about, in the end, it's about genetics. We're discovering, for example, and have been discovering, particularly since the advent of the nine-centered being, that you can be more successful, in a sense, generally speaking, being intelligent than you can simply being a brute. This is something that slowly but surely we begin to grasp, and we begin to, we begin to mate and bond according to certain standards of the expected intelligence of our offspring. And this is going to be rooted in our chemistry, obviously. It's rooted in all of us. This potential in each of us that can or may, be moved forward genetically. This core of the quarter, because as we go through these quarters, we'll see that obviously each quarter is going to have its core. It's going to have its central expression. And it tells you so much about what this is about. It says that, in essence, what it says is that mind has to be stimulated, and the stimulation that is necessary can only take place when the infrastructure is correct, and that the development of intelligence in form is something that is going to take time. The program does not have our sense of time. The 30, the 22, the 21, the 27. So interesting. The 22nd gate is a potentially deeply social gate in its ability to take in the other. And by hearing them, in essence, being able to mutate them. The 30th gate is the gate of the fates. It's the gate of the fates. The 21st gate is the gate of control. And the 27th gate is the gate of nurturing. And when you're looking now, you can begin to see how Janus, the eighth face, how it is this eighth face that becomes the expression of the other three faces. Remember, it's just a continuity and movement. I don't want to make this Janus more special than the others. It isn't. I'm deconstructing so that you can see how the process goes. In essence, we are moving from this, deep yang center until we finally get, to this deep yin center. And it is a progression. It is a movement. And it is this movement that takes us to everything has to go into and come out of the form. So the way we understand the form, the way we condition the form, but it's all form. It all has to go through that principle. And the 27th gate being the gate of nourishment coming out of the sacral center, that it is the 27th gate that nourishes what? It nourishes intelligence. The 5027, this channel, The 50th gate, the 50th gate, the cauldron, is an extraordinary gate. It is like the 6th gate. It is the central originating gates of its center. It is out of the 50th gate that the potential of the spleen emerges, just as it's out of the 6th gate that the solar plex emerges. And that the streams of intelligence that operate out of the splenic system, that is judgmentation, instinct, and intuition, that those three streams originate in the 50th gate, but the spleen is not a motor. This is our original basic intelligence potential, and its most natural resource of energy, the most natural, is the 27th gate. This is the sacral energy, and it is an energy that is there to feed the development of intelligence. So what feeds the development of intelligence? The fates feed the development of intelligence. Oh boy, do they ever. When the fates get in the way, that's how you learn. This is the key to the experiential way. You've got a plan. Don't expect it's going to work. Wait for the hand of the fates. And when you wait for the hands of the fates, while you're moving, you're prepared. And the moment that the fates step in the way, the moment that you can't go from A to B to C, is the moment you discover B minus, B plus, You discover all these new things. This is the hand of the fates. And what else feeds intelligence? Hearing. This is not the listening of the 13. This is a mutative process. If you're going to meet the 22nd gate, you're going to be locked into a deep mutative process. And what they hear is what they draw. You see, human beings have to have their intelligence drawn from them. But more than that, the most powerful mutation we had prior to the one that's coming in 2027 took place about 85,000 years ago. And that was the mutation of the larynx. That opened up the possibility for us to modulate our sounds and to control them in nuances. It made us different from our primate relatives who can breathe and drink at the same time. And that took place in the 12th gate. And it was empowered by the power of the 22. After all, we're dealing with a deeply, deeply mutative stream. The 3955, obviously a key to the coming mutation. The 2212, the key to the previous mutation. All individual. In other words, you have to have a mind that wants to be nourished and ready to be nourished. That's ready to share, so that ultimately those prodigals can hear, listen to what's going on and collect the experience, but hear the mutation and control. And control. And here you have one of the most special places. This 21. Its connection to the 27. This is how the not self, this is how mind, why, not how, why mind thinks it's in control. Because of this. It's right here, in this genetic continuity. Mind is in control because of the fates. Mind is in control because, at any moment mutation can take place. Mind is in control. And this is what's brought forward genetically. This is the fundamental nurturing necessary for intelligence. To nurture mental control. To nurture mutative encounter. To nurture dealing with the vagaries of life. But here the mind is given its control. It's Michael. It's this God's giving gifts to man. Thank you. Now that we've given you the gift of mind, now you can be in control of your life, says the personality crystal bundle. The program manipulating us into the homogenized delusion of the not-self. Courtesy of this continuity in this quarter. Mind controls. And you see, there's no escape. There's no escape. You can see the humanity is really locked in, And that this influence permeates in all consciousness. It does. And it's carried with great power by those who carry it. It's there. In the very beginning, I talked about, I think it was during Mitra, I talked about breaking the covenant. These gods, the way they manipulate us, the way they imprint this deep influence into our system, the way it opens us up to the acceptance of the programming imperative. Yet we know that it is not mind, that it is the way. We will see, we'll find the other side of this. But it is the influence, this deep influence of this quarter. To establish a brain in which the natural result of that is a self-reflected consciousness that believes that it is in control of its life. By the way, it has to believe that in order for the homogenized world to succeed. Aside from the fact that it has nothing to do with the potential for the fulfillment of a human in this time. As a homogenizing process, it's brilliant. The 55, the 36, the 51. Now those three together, that is already something. And of course it closes with the close, the cross of the four ways, the 24th gate, the return. The symbol of the returning into form, the cross of incarnation, if your son's there in the left angle. It is the close of the quarter, but it is also the opening up to civilization and the movement into civilization. What it brings is the thoughtfulness, a being that will be thoughtful, a being of brain and mind. That's what it's bringing. It is bringing this return of mind into form. And you can see that even though Janus is not the pure form principle, that it carries as its face this preparation for the coming yin. These four, yin, this center you of Janus, preparing the way for entering into civilization, to bring this into realization. And all of this is about developing the programming for mind. Now when we go back and we look at these three gates that feed this process, and we begin with the 55, what a place to start. Because of course, what can be said? We can call it a gate of spirit. That certainly is true. And within the context of the 55 gate, without thinking about 2027, we know that this spirit, this spirit is seeking its completion. That's what it's about. It's a mutative gate, after all. The most difficult thing for the 55 is not to experience completion, All individuals seek the completion of the creative act, the romantic encounter, there's all kinds of things. This realization of it. And the spirit is determined by whether the realization is there or not. And it's something to realize about thinking, that at the very root of the thinking process is the future of that process. What mind, in essence, will become when it's not mind, but it's solar plex neural potential. The 36th gate is the gate of crisis. But it is also the gate of the tremendous potential of being able to break the surface. It is inexperience seeking experience. That inexperience is a gift. It's a gift. And that in that sense we are all born equipped and naive at the same time. There is a naivete, an innocence we call it, in the young, in the new ones. Even though they carry the genetic tools that will be able to provide them everything they need, we cannot give them everything at once. It is part of the program. There must be the development of courage. See, the 36 and the 51 have a deep, deep bond to each other. Seems odd when you think about it. They're very different, obviously, within the context of the body graph. Again, this is one of the wonders of genetic continuity, is really to begin to see these relationships and the way in which they bring another nuance to an appreciation of what a gate really is and what it does, what it expresses. See, most of us, when we think about the 36th gate, we think in terms of crisis. It's got a heavy name, the darkening of the light. It's a gate of crisis. It leads to a channel of transitoriness. It carries desire, and it operates in a crash wave. And whenever you put it all in that context, everybody goes, oh, Jesus, yeah. It's not like that's everybody's friend. But you see, when I look at the stream, the 41, the 30, the 36, the 35, it is so obvious to me that as the integration channels are the backbone of survival, that the stream of feelings is the engine of existence. It's the engine of human experience. It is the human experiential way. And when you see it in that light, in the same way that we see the fates of the experiential way, that we just saw previously in the continuity. Here we're seeing this, this courage, because it's courage. They suffer a lot, after all. And depending on their configuration and many other things, it can be a very, very difficult process to carry this energy. Because in a sense, it is, despite fear, it is ready for the new experience. It is the engine of intelligence. That's what the experiential way does. It's not blessed with intelligence itself. Let's put it that way. It is the engine of intelligence. It creates the possibilities of it by creating experience. It's the 36 that has to deal with the 30. It is the 36 that when the fates step in the way and say, no, you can't go that way, it says, okay, I'll try this. I'll just go this way and see what happens. And the 51, the gate of shock, the arousing. This is a gate, keynoted as a gate of courage or folly. That is, courage can be very dumb, very stupid. There are too many examples. Soldiers going into hopeless situations simply to perish. Courage can be insane. At the same time, it is to have the courage to leap into the void. This is the essence of initiation. And so here in the 36 and the 51, you have something that is very, very special about the infrastructure of mind, that even though that we are, controlled by the not-self mind, the 21 that does its work, at the same time there is potential in all of that, because there is the courage to leap blindly beyond the control. And of course we know that. We know that. We have a whole history of human beings who have, challenged the concept that the mind is in charge. So there is this, the spirit of courage, this courage necessary to drive towards completion and realization is something that is part of mind. Mind is conditioned not to give up, not to be satisfied with, this and that. There's this driving force that's there. And yet, it's all physical. It all has to operate through the physical. And what we get to see when we go to the next quarter, because we've been there through the goddesses, basically the goddesses, is that the responsibility for the potential of mind is mother. It is the female that has to establish civilization. It is the female that has to establish education. It is the female form that the genetic movement has to pass through. We're not dealing with the yang here. We'll see how different that is. This is simply the yang pushing into the yin. The bringing of, mind into the form, consciousness, if you will, into the form. There are no other students of this knowledge that have ever been given such a view. The relationship between these gates is very profound. It is. It is something to understand that, what happens to one, in a sense, is something that is recognized and added to the nature of the other. See, I don't just see the program in the context of you and me. It is clear to me that I live in an ocean. I do. I live in an ocean, not on one. In it. So deep embedded in the ocean and so limited in my capacity to perceive that I can't even see it. And yet these zillions of neutrinos, the numbers are so huge, it's impossible to think about the density of this ocean that we move through. It's so dense. And we're surrounded by a star field. We're surrounded by these incredible forces of source information. The neutrino streams pouring out of stars and galaxies, and all of that information forming a vast ocean of information. And that vast ocean of information is penetrating the crystal bundles as it approaches the planet. The trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions, second after second after second after second, everywhere, all the time, endlessly pouring through. And not just pouring through our crystals, but the endless zillions of aspects of life on this planet endowed with crystals of consciousness. And the flower and the bee and the tree and every cell, all the inanimate objects, all bathing, all immersed in this deep, deep ocean. And it is not a still ocean. It is a huge ocean, and it's a current. And we are moving in space. We are moving in the current of this huge ocean. I mean, the ocean is traveling at nearly 186,000 miles a second. That's fast. What a thing. See, we're in this dense programming field. And in this ocean, this is 1/4 of the ocean you're looking at. It's 1/4 of primary conditioning. First off conditioning. By the way, at the same time that the neutrino field is pouring down on us and through the crystal bundle, it is also pouring through the earth and through the design crystal bundle. I mean, and it's all multi-directional. I mean, the density of the programming, I'm not looking at any of this specifically relative to the body. To go through the quarters relative to design. Very different. I mean, obviously similarities, like doing the chains between PHS and rave psychology. They're similar, but they're different. This is this vast ocean we're in. See, it's why humanity is in such a thrall. It's not just the planets moving around. It's not these gates that open and close. It's this information field that we live in. We cannot escape what is established here. We cannot change it. We cannot challenge it. All we can do is break the covenant. This is what we can do. I will listen to the gods, but I will not obey them. This is breaking the covenant. I will listen to the gods. I watch my mind. It is the expression of consciousness filtered through me. I watch it. I do not obey it. It is not my God. It is just mind. I obey my authority, my inner authority. This is the only way that you break the covenant. It is no lack of respect to the gods, by the way. It's not like being an atheist, if you know what I mean. They understand. I'm anthropomorphizing, but it's built into the program that such a phenomena can take place. This phenomena, our phenomena, of breaking the covenant. See, humanity has always known that, they just didn't understand it. So they go from one religion and one sect and one this and one that to the next, and they keep on creating new variations of old variations and on, break the covenant with this one and that one, and yeah. No, it's not about that. We cannot escape them. We cannot escape the impact. Our minds are always going to resonate to these formulas. And we will have a spectrum in our awareness as to where we stand relative to any of them. But we are not here to obey these gods. No. Not at all. We respect them for their work. May they do their job well. But we do not obey them. No. This is the breaking of the covenant. Okay. Nice to share it all with you. our penultimate week. And yeah, until next week, we'll take a look at the quarter of civilization. Okay, bye for now.